why don't you tell us a little bit more about Twitter? Not to advertise my own wares, but I'd like to know how it's changed the way you say you've traveled quite a bit and you've done a lot of talking. And has Twitter opened up for you any new, routes, any new relationships, that sort of thing?
いろいろあって、例えば簡単なところで言えば、やはりいろいろ講演など、旅行でも旅先に行った時に今ここにいるよなんていうことをつぶやきますと、今僕は6万人の方にフォローしていただいているんですけれども、その土地の方が今ここに来てくださったならこんな店が美味しいですよとか、こんな食べ物がおすすめですよとか、お土産奥さんに買って帰るならこんなものどうですかとか、いろいろおすすめをしてくださるんですね。だから今まで以上にその土地に行った時の、楽しみ度というのが格段にツイッターをしてから増したんじゃないのかなというのはありますね。あとはやっぱり僕自身がそれまで例えばテレビに出ていたり著名な方に対してすごく興味を持っていて、そこに対して当然普段お仕事でお会いする機会なんかはなくても、何かツイッターをフォローしていてちょっと勇気を出して話しかけてみると、実は向こうも僕に対して興味を持ってくださっていて、未だにお会いしたことはないんですけれども、ツイッター上でいろいろなお話をさせていただいたりなんていうこともありますし、逆にじゃあ今度飲みに行こうなんていうことでツイッターが縁でお会いさせていただいたなんていうケースもありますし、そういった意味では本当に僕の世界を広げてくださったツールだなというふうに思うんですね。でそれはでも紐解いてみると、実は子どもの頃からの僕のコミュニケーションの方法とからの延長線上なのかなというふうに思うんですね。僕はやっぱりこういう障害があるので、やっぱり日本ではアメリカと違ってまだまだ障害のある人に対しての慣れというものが少ないんですね。アメリカでは別にハンディキャップのある人が街中を歩いているのは当たり前、職場にいても別に普通という環境だと思うんですけれども、日本ではまだすごく珍しいですし、実際出会ってしまう、特に僕のように手も足もないなんていう人間を目の前にすると、どうやって接したらいいんだろうというふうに戸惑ってしまう方がほとんどだと思うんですね。ですから僕は向こうから相手から僕に対して話しかけてもらうとか、コミュニケーションを図ってもらうというのを待っていると、皆さんとしてはなかなか話しかけづらい、どういうふうに話しかけていいんだろうというふうに戸惑ってしまうと思うんですよね。それはやっぱり子どもの頃から感じていたので、僕の方から積極的に僕はこういう人間ですよというのを公開していく。それによって、相手の胸に飛び込んでいくというふうなコミュニケーションの仕方を無意識のうちにしてきたと思うんですね。だからそれが多分ツイッターを始めても同じで、やはりフォロワーの方に対しても、それから僕がフォローしている著名人の方に対しても、僕はこういう人間ですということを積極的に伝えていく。それによって相手にこっちを向いてもらう、興味を持ってもらうというのは子どもの頃からと実は変わりがないのかなという気がしていますね。
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I think that gets back to what we sort of originally said, which was the idea that this open exchange of information can really have positive global impact, and you have this very open personality, not just on Twitter but in person. Even when I met you, I come up to you, say hello, and you immediately came to me and said, "Here's how you shake my hand," right? So I didn't even have to think about it. And you're very open on Twitter. And by the way, he said he had 60,000 followers. I checked. I think you have about 160,000 followers in a very short amount of time. It's very impressive. But that open exchange of information. There's a few things. There's a bunch of stuff you mentioned there that's very interesting to me. The proactive idea, the open exchange of information that you sort of embody, is something that's very interesting to me, because I have a personal theory that the more we open up, and the more we share our lives and what's happening around us with one another around the world, I think the more we get connected to each other, the more empathy we feel for people around the world, and we begin to understand. We begin to be able to sort of feel what other people feel, and this empathy leads to us realizing that we're not just citizens of one city or one nation, but we are global citizens, and we're all really in this together. And I hope that tools like Twitter will connect people together in a way that allows us to have kind of an alignment of thinking, and so that we can move much faster together. One of the things that I like to talk about when I explain Twitter to people is to ask them to visualize a flock of birds moving around an object in flight. It's something that when you look at it, it looks so beautiful. It looks very choreographed. But the mechanics of flocking are actually very simple. It's just rudimentary communication among individuals in real time that allow them to behave as if they're one organism. And Twitter is something that allows people to behave this way. And we didn't realize this fully when we created it, but when we began to see people moving together as one, the hairs in the back of our neck began to stand up, because we thought maybe this will lead to a whole new kind, a whole new era of people working together to do good things, to help each other, and to open up. And like you say, just be more open about things and get things out in the open, and not have necessarily special schools or anything like this. Let's be open and bring more people together. And the fact that I can follow you on Twitter and use technology to translate your tweets that are in Japanese into English, I think is a good example of how the world is coming together. Another thing that you mentioned, which is interesting to me because it's something that I've sort of said all along, is the idea that you can go into a new city and you can say to your Twitter followers, I'm in this city, I'm having a beer, who wants to join me? Very early on, people told us when we first created Twitter that it was not useful, and that is tweeting that you were having a beer, who cares? But what I thought about it, when you think about it a little bit more deeply, it's almost a kind of social alchemy. Like the old alchemists wanted to turn something simple like lead into gold. And something simple like I'm having a beer at the Narita airport seems like lead. However, if someone else happens to be in that airport, maybe a fan of yours or somebody who wants to meet you, a follower of yours, gets that tweet, maybe they join you for a beer. And maybe you start talking about, maybe in my case, a new startup idea, and we have a wonderful idea for a new company. Or you say, hey, you know what we should do? We should buy a baseball team. Twitter should have a baseball team. What team should we have if we buy a baseball team?
ちょうどね、今日は今朝のニュースである関東にある球団が売り出すんじゃないかななんていうニュースが出てたんで、そのあたり狙い目かもしれないですね。なんとかツイッターズっていうチームに誕生するかもしれないですね。どうですか？
Yeah, we can call it the Twitter Bluebirds. How about that? We can do that. Here.
すでにロゴもある。
We're getting into the baseball. We're getting into the baseball business. Ototaki-san, is there anything that you want to ask me about? Maybe about Twitter, or about the way that we approach business, or anything you want. I'm open to also to your questions. I don't want to monopolize all of your time.
僕は先ほど一番最初に質問していただいたことの逆で、こんな素晴らしいシステムを思いついたビズというのはどんな少年時代を送ってきた、例えばクラスの中ではどういうキャラ性格だったのかなっていうのがすごく気になりました。
That's a good question. I was very lucky because my mother was adopted, and her parents died before I could meet them, and my mother raised myself and my three sisters, but we didn't have any money, but her parents left her a house in a suburb of Boston, Massachusetts, which is a very affluent suburb. And so I didn't realize how lucky I was at the time, but I was able to go to a very good public school system. And I distinctly remember the very first day my mother tried to drop me off at nursery school. I clung to her leg and I refused to go into the school. And I was very strong, and I held onto her leg for an hour, and she had to give up and take me home. But the next day she took me again, and this time they were able to pry me loose. And when she came to pick me up, I refused to leave. I loved learning, and I loved drawing, and I loved all these sorts of things. So my early elementary school career was wonderful. I remember I won an award for an art award because the teacher noticed that we were asked to draw an object, and I decided to lay upside down and draw the object I saw upside down. And she rewarded me for having a unique perspective. Mm-hmm. As I progressed through school and got to high school, as I said, I realized that you really can take life into your own hands. And maybe it was because the school was very different, and I had very good teachers who recognized someone who had, a spirit to do these kind of things. I wasn't very good at math, actually, but what I did was I would draw cartoons on the side of my math test. And my teacher gave me credit for the cartoon. He said, "Okay, you passed because I give you 2 extra points for the cartoon." But I also got into trouble a lot because I like to break rules, and I felt I always had good reason to break the rules. And when I explained why I broke rules, usually the teachers agreed with me. So I would say I was a good student. I got scholarships to go to university, but I also, I got into trouble a lot, and I had a very unique mix of friends. I was on the lacrosse team, so I was kind of like a jock because of that. But all of my friends were more like nerds, and geeks, and so it was a strange mix, and that was my sort of school career. But I very much liked going to school, and now I realize how lucky I was when I look now at even the schooling system in the United States is failing systemically on many levels. There are many problems. Children are not getting education that they deserve to get, and that's the United States. And forget about some of the other areas of the world, like in India and Africa and things, where people can't even go to school because they don't have clean water, so they have to go fetch clean water instead of going to school. I mean, these are basic things, and these are things that I'm beginning to realize. And so one of the things that we've done with Twitter is we've aligned the company with these causes. So one of our partners is an organization called Room to Read, which builds schools and libraries in developing nations for kids to learn how to read and to break the cycle of poverty. And one of the things that I'm fond of saying is that if we do our job very well with Twitter and we grow all around the world, then we're going to come up against a new kind of scaling problem, and that will be literacy, because if you can't read, you can't tweet. So while it may seem altruistic to help build libraries around the world, maybe it also is secretly a plan to get more users.